Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Talking Sense with Karen and Hayley. Today I'm going to be talking about how I personally create a fragrance and the process I use when I'm creating them, and what I'm trying to create by what I'm trying to do rather by following those steps. So I create. Last time Hayley was talking about how a fragrance is constructed, and we talked about the fragrance pyramid, so the top, middle, and base notes. And that's all about the longevity of fragrance and how it evaporates off and all that. And that is part of my considerations. But when I create a perfume, I create. I look at the story that I'm trying to tell with that perfume. So in my private client work, for example, I want to tell their life story, what's important to them, the things that they loved when they were kids, the things they love now, and importantly, how they want to be perceived by other people. And I, as well as breaking down the top, middle, and base notes for the overall construction of the fragrance, I try and make each part of that the enclosed fragrance, the total fragrance, into fit into those parts. So, for example, I want what they love now is going to be mainly the top notes. The things that make them who they are will be in the middle, and how they want to be perceived by others will underlie all of that. So they'll go into my base notes. So I'm sort of breaking down what I want the perfume to say into how it's going to say it through that fragrance pyramid.
I love that, Karen.
So, so I might have two parts in the middle, because I was taught to do it by creating a modifier fragrance and a blender. So my top notes that create the first part of the story are then softened by my modifiers, and then I use the blenders to bring them into the bottom notes. Because when you're talking about the fragrance pyramid and how the top notes go away during the first 15 minutes, you only want some of them to go away. So you want the other fragrances in the other levels to sort of hold on to them. So it doesn't change completely. It's like the volatile notes will dissipate, but the echo of them will still be there. What I like to say is I like to try and get the notes to dance together. So it's kind of like I remember being at school and doing like the square dancing or barn dance sorts of things, where you change parts as you around the room, and that's how I like the perfume to be created. So when you're smelling the top note, let's go with orange. So orange is going to dissipate off quickly, but I want it to last a little bit longer, so I might add some frankincense into the modifiers, which will sort of hold on to the orange and keep it there, so keep some of it there, so you've got that constant changing of partners, so the fragrance has a nice flow to it as it moves through its different fragrances. So that's sort of how I technically like to work, but the artistry of it for me is in matching up the nature of a fragrance with the emotion that you're trying to create. So happy memories will tend to be represented, very simply speaking, by the likes of citruses, because they're excitable and they're vibrant and they move quickly. And then more thoughtful moments will be represented by the base notes, which would be things like sandalwood and even frankincense that can fit. Frankincense for me sits in the middle of middle notes and base notes. It can straddle that. So it's about sort of looking at what something evokes. So when I again, on my private client work, I will tend to use around 80 to 90% essential oils, because I see the energetic aspect of them as correlating very closely with emotions. But then I like to use the aroma chemicals then to add light and shade and depth and sparkle that that you can't get when you start to overcomplicate an essential oil blend. We mentioned in our previous video that it can become muddy. It just develops a generic smell where you can't really tell what it's trying to do. And aroma chemicals really balance that nicely. They add, as I said, they can add a sparkle, and they can bring out the best in something. So it's kind of like if you're wearing a black dress, but black doesn't suit your skin tone, and you'd put a pink scarf on to sort of lift you. It's that kind of effect. It changes the nature of something just by showcasing it to a better advantage, really. But I have this love of telling stories with perfume, because I can't draw. And I always wanted to be an artist, and I'm like, I can do a basic drawing. I would impress your average 4-year-old, but not that. I'm no good at drawing at all. But I can actually express in quite a lot of detail what I want to express in perfume. And for me, the joy of having such a vast palette to call on and create something that paints a picture, even for people who don't really know what they're seeing, because it's a multi-dimensional thing. So it's the whole creation process is a thing of joy for me. So I'm looking at, top, middle, base notes. I'm looking at the emotions I want to connect with. I'm looking at what each fragrance can do and represent. For example, I'm looking over my shelves with my aroma chemicals on. There are some over there that smell of the sea, or that smell like ozone, or there's even I can't remember the chemical name right now because I'm chatting, but there's even one that I use to represent stone. So, when somebody asked me for a hard edge, but they didn't want a metallic note, they wanted, something that was more reminiscent of sandstone. Yeah. And you can find that in aroma chemicals, but you cannot find that in essential oils. So it's those kind of that kind of finesse that I'm looking for. So for me, it's it's just really something to enjoy in much the same way as an artist would set up their easel and get their palette out and start mixing the colours. That's what I like to do with perfume. Most of the time I'll start, my starting point is the story that I want to tell, but sometimes I get them out and I'll just have a play, and I'll think, well, I'm going to start with a particular ingredient, say jasmine, and see what I can do with it and what I can make that do next. Because it's like, why wouldn't you? You wouldn't just have your box of colouring pencils and only ever use red. You want to see how you can make things, different. And that's my thing. I think when I'm constructing a fragrance, really my most important thing is to evoke emotion and tell stories, and that's my start. That's my process.
Yeah, and I think it's like you say though. I think that's why it's such a good way to describe it is like an art, because it's just like colouring. It's just like making music. It's taking these different elements, whether it be a colour or a note, a musical note, and playing with them and blending with them. And you wouldn't see a chef or a musician, like a composer or an artist, just sitting there with 2 or 3 colouring pencils and doing the same thing over and over again, just maybe in a different direction. Yeah. They would be putting things in at different times and blending them in different proportions and things like that. That's why I think putting it in with the art just makes so much sense, because the similarities are perfect.
Yeah, I mean, I was relatively late to university education, just because that's the way my life path went, and I get a huge kick out of knowing the science, but it's not what drives me forward. But I do like this idea that, you know, the different molecular weights are what makes a perfume a whole. You know, to me, it needs those different molecular weights and those different behaviours to create the whole symphony. You know, it's the difference, isn't it, between listening to next door's 7-year-old doing their scales on the piano and listening to somebody playing Beethoven, you know, suite. So, you know, for me, I love the fact that it can be simple and beautiful, or massively complex and still beautiful. But the art is in making sure that the end user sees that beauty, and importantly, the people around the end user, if you're talking about a perfume, because you don't want people to be choking in their weight.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's why it's, and I think we've said it a few times, it is a living art, and it's a blend between art and science, because you cannot have one without the other.
Yeah.
You can create a technically robust fragrance with all that knowledge that I mentioned. If you haven't watched the video just before this one, where I talked about the technical aspects of how you would create a perfume, you can't do that and not do the bit that you've just spoken about, because as I say, it could be technically fine, but if you don't have that story to tell, you don't have those things blended in a way where they dance together beautifully and result in something that is something special, you're not going to have hit your target. You're not going to have you're not going to get a perfume that people are going to appreciate and love and smell over and over again.
Yeah, and that's the thing, isn't it? It's that sweet spot between what works on a scientific basis and creates that beautiful flow, but you can't get, you know, even if you're the best scientist in the world, you can't get that beautiful flow without an element of artistry.
Yeah, and it works both ways, doesn't it? Because you can create the most beautiful smelling fragrance, and you've completely hit the nail on the head from the brief, and you've told the story. But then if it disappears after 30 seconds,
exactly, the whole thing's gone. Yeah.
Well, why did I bother doing that? Like, I'll have to spray it every 30 seconds. So they both hold each other's hands, and you can't have one without the other. And really, the two of them is what creates a mega star, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's the same thing as, you know, like people's look at those Turner art exhibitions, don't they? And they say, how is that art?
Yeah.
You know, really, and my 5-year-old could do better. But and I have to admit, I feel slightly like that about the Turner exhibitions. But I'm thinking of Jackson Pollock, for example. He's the one with the dots, you know, the sort of paint. And people pay tens of thousands because he splashes that paint with coal. It's
beauty and simplicity.
Not just anyone can splash paint like that.
We'll do it so that whatever, Karen Quinn can put one ingredient in a bottle and it'll be worth millions.
Oh, that would be nice. Yeah. But yeah, this is you know, it's the fabulous thing about perfume. It's why we're in the industry, isn't it? It's that it walks a beautiful line between art and science, and it can satisfy people on so many different levels and reach people in ways you never expected and convey messages. And it's just I just think I'm blessed to be a perfumer. You know, I feel really lucky that I've, you know, even though it came late in life, you know, I wish I had found it when I was in my 20s, but that wasn't to be. But you know, I'm now nearly 15 years into my fragrance journey, and I love it as much as the first time I sniffed my very first drop of lavender essential oil and fell in love. So,
that's the thing. It is so powerful, isn't it? It's an amazing thing. But yes, so hopefully that has sufficed your thirst for knowledge about how to create a perfume from an artistic point of view. As I said, we've done a video just previously about the technical side. This one we talked more about the artistry and the storytelling of it and how Karen does that. So if you watch the two in conjunction, it'll make a lot of sense. And yeah, just click a like and a subscribe if you like the video, and drop us any comments or questions if you've got any particular burning thoughts or ideas that you want to share with us. Just drop them in the comments below, and we'll be in touch with you, and we'll see you on the next video.